A damp start to the race shook up the order in Hungary, but the defending world champion marched yet again on his record quest for a 7th world title. Welcome back to the Formula One Grid Talk podcast. Today we will be analysing this weekend's Hungarian Grand Prix. We're powered by the F1 Chronicle. Visit f1chronicle.com for news, reviews and opinions on all things F1. My name is Louis Edwards and I will be your host today, and joining me are multimedia journalist Ruby Price.
Hello.
Engineering student Owain Medford.
Hello.
And the president of the Chris Medland Fanclub, it's Sam Thatcher.
I love that. Hello. Thanks, George, for that. That's great.
Well, interesting start to the race. Even before the start of the race, we'll come to you, Ruby. Max Verstappen, he just about made it to the grid, didn't he?
Yeah, I mean, as soon as I saw that, he was in the wall, I was like, is Max's race already over before it's begun? And honestly, fair play to those mechanics for actually getting that car, race-worthy in time. Yeah, it could have been it will have been a very nervy, 20 minutes for Red Bull prior to the lights out. Yeah,
they did a heroic job to get that car fixed in time. I mean, I think that they got the tyres on with like 20 seconds before the hands off, which is incredible. But it was a greasy start to the race, Owain, and it looked like it could catch quite a few drivers out.
Yeah, it had rained before. The track wasn't fully dry, so you had everyone gambling on intermediates, some gambling on wets with one of the Hasses. It did seem that some people were a bit caught out, and there was sort of a few, no incidents really at the first corner or the first few corners on the lap, but people didn't seem to be fully up to speed with it.
But controversy, Sam, at the start of the race, Valtteri Bottas and Kimi Räikkönen both having some issues. Valtteri Bottas appearing to jumpstart and Kimi Räikkönen out of place on the grid.
Yeah, Bottas weird. I think he did the start, didn't he? Jumped the start and then had to do launch control again. That kind of screwed up his whole race in the end, but he didn't get a penalty for it. I'm assuming that's because he didn't really gain an advantage from jumping in the start. That's why he hasn't got a penalty. And he didn't actually go fully out of his grid box. I think that's another reason why he hasn't got the penalty, but I'm not too sure. And then Räikkönen, I'm guessing he was just a bit thrown off by the two Hasses diving into the pits before the race started. So I'm guessing he just didn't realise they were there and just went into the wrong grid slot. And I guess someone with his experience should really know better than that. And that's a slam dunk penalty, really, going into the wrong grid slot. So that's fair enough. But the Bottas one's a bit more complicated, and I can kind of see why they haven't given him the penalty, really, because he didn't gain kind of any kind of fair advantage on anyone by doing that, did he? So it's a difficult one. But yeah, I think I agree with the stewards in that way. But it definitely...
Yeah, it's very reminiscent of Suzuka with Sebastian Vettel. He didn't quite leave his grid box, therefore didn't get a penalty. Of course, we've seen it sort of quite a few times in the last sort of year or so with drivers just edging a bit close, but very lucky to get away with that today. But we'll get on actually now to the race, and we'll start with the man who took this race by the scruff of his neck and dominated throughout. Ruby, it was a sensational drive today by Lewis Hamilton.
It really was. I mean, for the statistics to say that, he only finished 8.7 seconds ahead of Verstappen is criminal, really. If you take into account the fact that, had an extra pit stop, he could have very much easily have lapped all the way up until, position 4 in this race. And historically been very good at this track. He's now won it 8 times. There's a reason why he's won that race 8 times. And today he proved it.
Yeah, absolutely amazing. But as you said, only 8.7 seconds behind second place Max Verstappen, who, after his, a bit issues, let's say the least, at the beginning, like before the start of the race, did incredibly well to come home P2.
Yeah, so it would have been obviously incredibly stressful, 20 minutes to get track rod and I believe a push rod changed. So that's an excellent job by the Red Bull mechanics, especially given the sort of precautions we have to take with coronavirus in F1 now. So, fewer people allowed to work on the car at the same time. And he really did well, actually, to try and take the fight as best he could to what I would call probably one of the most dominant Mercedes performances since 2016. He did give it his best shot. Unfortunately, I think the Mercedes were just a bit too fast.
Yeah, they were incredibly fast all throughout the weekend. We really should be bowing down to our Mercedes overlords this season. They have been absolutely incredible. Mercedes, because only finished P3, did decide to change tyres late in the race, trying to get history to repeat itself. Do you think the gamble was worth the risk, Sam, or do you think he should have stayed out and maybe had a bit more of an attack on Verstappen?
Talking about Bottas?
Yes.
Yeah. So he pretty much tried to do the same thing Lewis did last year, really, didn't he? Hit for fresher tyres and catch what hurts him. And then he did by the end of the lap, but I never really kind of believed he would do it, because that's the difference between Lewis and Valtteri, I think, is Lewis can get that kind of thing done. I don't think Valtteri, and when it all comes down to it, can do that. And that's just the reason why I think Lewis is going to walk away with it. I don't think Valtteri is going to really come close to him for the rest of the season, to be honest. I hope I'm wrong. I hope we get a really good battle for the title, but I just think what we saw today is it's the difference between like a great driver in Bottas and then like a world-class driver, which is Lewis. On Lewis' performance, that was just amazing the whole weekend. It really annoys me when people say, "Oh, he's got his best car. That's the only reason why he's winning." I think we saw today one of the reasons why he's one of the greatest of all time, in my opinion.
He is brilliant, and there's literally no denying it anymore. He is definitely now on his way to a 7th world title. Bottas, despite having a great race in Austria, just seems to not be able to keep up.
He seemed really down in his post-race interview as well. He seemed just really kind of dejected, and we'll see if he can come back from it. But personally, I don't really see it.
Now, on to the other Mercedes team, Racing Point. Lance Stroll got an amazing start. I think absolutely incredible start. I think he was in P2 for a short amount of time, but still managed to finish 4th, Ruby. Absolutely great drive. I say that very begrudgingly for Lance Stroll.
Yeah, like obviously, you are one of Lance Stroll's very outspoken critics. Even with his father owning that team, he sort of very much has to prove that he deserves a seat coming up in the next season. And today, I think he will. Well, I think this weekend, really, he will have done that. He seems to have been on top of Checo at least yesterday and today. And yeah, as you mentioned, he was up into 2nd at the start. And whether you consider Valtteri's jump start, which would have probably bogged him down a little bit, Lance Stroll is trying to prove that he's actually deserving of a place in Formula One.
Yeah, it's still a lot of unknown about what will happen with Racing Point, who will be Aston Martin next year. Well, we probably know that Stroll will probably keep his seat, but who will partner him next year is still very much an unknown. But if we do jump down now, instead of going to Alex Albon, Sergio Perez didn't have a great start. He was not doing particularly brilliant sort of pace-wise against his teammate Owain, and in the end could only manage 7th place.
Yeah, he didn't seem to hook it up as much. Obviously, he came, 4th in qualifying, and didn't seem to do very well off the start. I think that did sort of hamper his progress significantly. He dropped 3 or 4 places at the start, and it didn't seem to recover from there. I don't know whether that's maybe Perez's driving style tends to make tyres last, and he's seen that work for him in the past in dry races, but it could be that he just doesn't get the heat into the tyres or something like that, and he maybe struggles to, he just struggled to hold the pace of someone who in an equal car, took it from 3rd to 4th, with obviously Max Verstappen getting a great race in comparison. So he has obviously lost a few places, and he's ended up behind the Ferrari, which you wouldn't say is actually deserving of being above him. So I think it's been a bit of a rough day for him there.
It's been a rough weekend. He's not been feeling great, and losing out to Stroll in both qualifying and the race is not what he needs right now, especially when he's fighting for a seat. Now, Alex Albon had a very poor qualifying, out in Q2, but I don't think there could be any doubt that he had a pretty good race today.
Yeah, I do feel quite sorry for Albon, really, because whoever the second driver is at Red Bull, they're going to be up against it the whole time, because that car is really designed to suit Max, isn't it? And then whoever is the second driver has to adapt to that. And we saw Gasly couldn't really do that, and we've seen Albon do a little bit of a better job of it, but he's been struggling. We struggled last week, and then yesterday, that was quite sad to see. And then we saw George Russell come out and defend his mate, which I quite loved, actually. It's quite fiery about it. And we saw Max go back at George Russell as well. So it's quite a lot, which is quite exciting. Albon did a really good job today. I thought He was aggressive. He got the moves done when he needed to, like when he was stuck behind Leclerc for a little while, down the inside and cleared him pretty quickly. Good battle with Vettel as well for a couple of times. He passed him at least 2 or 3 times during the race and, got up into a decent points paying position. So, really good job from him. I hope he kicks on from this into the coming races.
Yeah, especially you've got to give him props. Yeah, he might have finished, over a minute behind Max, but he had to come all the way from 13th, while Max had a great start and was already up into 3rd by turn 1. So it's still a great performance. I think if he hadn't had such a bad qualifying, he really could have been up there. Maybe it's sort of with that sort of 3rd and 4th place. Maybe
he's done that quite a few times during his Red Bull career, hasn't he? I think like Belgium last year, he did quite a few overtakes. That's one thing Gasly wasn't really doing in his time Red Bull. He just wasn't like getting through the midfield cars like Alex is. So I really hope they stick by him for the rest of the season, to be honest.
Yeah, I think a lot of people probably share your opinion on that one. Now, Ruby, on to the 2 Scarlet Red cars. Sebastian Vettel and Charles Leclerc. Vettel started 5th, Leclerc 6th, but in the end it was Vettel 6th, Leclerc 11th. Horrendous strategy for Leclerc, and Vettel just didn't really have much pace in this race either.
Yeah, I mean, Charles Leclerc's race was basically over from the minute Ferrari sent him out in those soft tyres. And then obviously no one wants to pit when there's a threat of rain, but when you've got to continue on grainy tyres, that's just going to dampen your spirit the entire time. So poor show for Charles Leclerc. Sebastian, I figure if he would have actually reacted to the pit stop at the particular moment when there was definitely a gap for him to get out in, he could have had a completely different race and, probably have finished at least ahead of Albon. I feel for a Ferrari, finishing in the position you start in this current, season is all they can aim for, provided they start in a decent position. But yeah, disappointing. I think Sebastian will be disappointed with that. And even me as a non-Vettel fan think that he should have had a better race today.
It was certainly disappointing. If Ferrari, F1 made the joke before this weekend saying which midfield team's going to score the most podiums with Ferrari on that list. It really does look like Ferrari are in that. Yeah. Now, Owain, we had a fairly sort of understated race from Daniel Ricciardo today. He didn't do anything wrong, and he didn't really do anything spectacular. It was just a very solid race from Daniel Ricciardo today.
Yeah, he's almost done a bit of a Hulkenberg there, really. He's not actually had that much of an amazing race. He's not really set the world alight with what he's done in the race, or, we didn't see any sort of Danny Rick moves like you'd expect down into turn 1 or maybe turn 3. It is turn 3. He also didn't sort of put himself in trouble. He was up as high as 5th. He made those tyres last a fairly long time. He just couldn't sort of convert it. I think he was always going to be caught out a bit on the strategy by leaving him out that lot as long as he was. But it's a decent points haul for all the Renault in the midfield battle. But, like I say, it's just kind of, he never sort of showed us a reason why we should see him on the TV.
Yeah, I mean, still with you about Ocon. Ocon also didn't have a very sort of glamorous race today either. He started outside the points, finished outside the points.
I remember seeing him on the screen once.
At the end of the race with Lando, like he was there a little bit, but
he was there 2 or 3 times, and I don't really remember him doing anything, to be honest. This isn't a race that had a lot of wheel-to-wheel action, not a lot of cutting about. It was just sort of moving between the battles, and they just never were in any battles really.
Yeah, they were not brilliant today, but not terrible. It's average.
It's just Renault things, isn't it, to be average?
Now, one team that we thought were going to play awful in free practice, really bad in qualifying, but Kevin Magnussen walks away from this race with 2 points, and Grosjean may have finished 15th, but he was in the points for a good amount of that race, Sam.
Yeah, well, you got to say it was an absolute genius call from them to bring them in before the start of the race to get them off, because Magnussen was in a start on full wets. That would be absolute lunacy, wouldn't it, to start on those full wets when it's pretty much bone dry track really at the start. So yeah, good genius call from them. I don't know if it's Gunter who made that call, whoever made that call. They're absolute legend because they've pretty much got past 2 points today. And yeah, Magnussen did a really good job of just sticking in there. He wasn't really coming under. I thought he would come under a lot of pressure from like the likes of Leclerc and Sainz at the end of the race, but they weren't really anywhere near him. So he must have managed his tyres very well. I mean, he's got Haas's first 2 points of the season, when yesterday it really looked like they were battling with like Alfa Romeo and Williams for the wooden spoon at the end of the order, really. So yeah, really good job from Magnussen, and probably a contender for driver of the day, really.
I was also very surprised. I think Sainz and Leclerc were just holding each other up a bit too much in their sort of battle.
And Grosjean. Are we doing Grosjean now, or?
Yeah, you can go on to Grosjean now if you want.
Yes. So Grosjean, he had the same kind of. He benefited from the strategy, didn't he, at the start? But I think he was complaining he had some sort of problem with the car. He had no grip. But then again, I think that's what Grosjean. That's kind of Grosjean's is not as good a driver as Magnussen is. I think that's the general kind of opinion people have. Magnussen is a bit of a better driver. Grosjean just seemed to go backwards and backwards, but finished 15th in the end, was it?
Yeah.
So yeah, well done to Magnussen and well done to Grosjean for a bit. But yeah, you can see the difference in the drivers there, I think.
You might want to tell Codemasters about the opinion about
the ratings. Yeah.
Right, now on to a team that I thought would do a lot better in this race, but in fact had a very poor race. McLaren, really, they really were just not on it today.
Yeah, a very disappointing day for McLaren for sure. Like we've said many times during like the podcast since the season properly got underway, McLaren are a team to be reckoned with this season, yet their pace just wasn't there. We saw some, but having said that, we saw some really good battles with Norris and Sainz. Norris defending for all his might against the Ferrari, Sainz attacking for all his might against the Ferrari. Yeah, they just weren't there, and sure, there's going to be a lot of investigation going on within that team to see where the pace disappeared to, because up until the second half of Q3 yesterday, as I said in yesterday's podcast, McLaren were right there, and then they just disappeared.
Yeah, it was very disappointing. Sort of crumb of comfort as last lap Lando was managed to get past Esteban Ocon, but
Sainz got held up in the pits, I think, quite a bit when everyone came in for their
yeah.
So I think that's where he lost a lot of time.
Collision with Latifi, which we'll get onto a bit later. AlphaTauri, not a great weekend all round. Kvyat finished in 12th. Gasly finished with an engine full of smoke, looking like they need things to improve pretty rapidly.
Yeah, Gasly's going to obviously take, that's yet more engine damage, which he really can't afford, bearing in mind he's had a number of engine component replacements already. We're just 3 races into however long this season will be. The teams don't know how many components they've got or what they're allowed, and yet, various parts, be going up in smoke, which is obviously not good. That's obviously potential points right off the bat that they've lost. And then Kvyat didn't really he didn't do anything really. It's a good result to go up 5 places from his grid position of 17th, but it's just not good enough really, I guess. You'd maybe hope that he would be able to capitalise on Leclerc's poor strategy or the fact that Carlos Sainz, a number of the other drivers above that position got held up in the Leclerc line sort of train when he was on that poor strategy. But yeah, it just didn't manage to make it anywhere. I don't know, squandered his opportunity really.
Yeah, and if you think back to last year, changeable conditions, they were doing very well, and yeah, this race did not go their way at all. Sam, Alfa Romeo, again, a very dull race for them. Kimi was doing well; he had decent race pace, but also had to sort of race with the fact that you're going to be slapped with a penalty at the end of the race.
Yeah, they are in a bad spot, aren't they? With that Ferrari engine, I just don't really see it getting better any time soon for them, really. Gio really didn't see him for the whole race, did we? He's another one of those that you just kind of forgot was there because he didn't have the pace to be fighting anybody, just going around in the zone. And Kimi was in like 11th at one point, wasn't he? At some point during the race, but yeah, had to serve his 5-second time penalty. So yeah, it was a pretty dismal race for Alfa Romeo, as we kind of expected. Yesterday they were 19th and 20th, and they're in a really bad spot at the moment. I just don't see how it kind of gets better for them. A few years ago, when they were Sauber, 2017, they were terrible, and they kind of got better in 2018 when Leclerc was there. Last year they were up and down. This seems like this year they just can't really get anything going, to be honest.
Yeah, it's not looking good for them at all. They're not really going anywhere. I think they ruined the day that they signed that contract with Ferrari where it was like, oh, we'll get the current engine. I think they really could have done with last year's Ferrari engine, didn't they?
Giovinazzi, I don't know if he's going to be really. I don't know how they really see him at Ferrari, because I don't think he's really good enough to go to Ferrari. Well, he's not going to Ferrari, is he, anytime soon? So I wouldn't be surprised if he's out of the seat for next season, to be honest, with how well Schwartzman's doing in F2. So we'll see.
Yeah, Callum Ilott this morning also absolutely brilliant. There are a lot of good Ferrari young drivers coming through. It could spell real issues for Antonio Giovinazzi.
He's sort of a Raikkonen's Raikkonen, really. He's sort of, that's how I see him. I don't see him. He's just, he's a rear gunner. Opportunity arises, and if you get to good points result, then well, hey.
Yeah, it does seem to be a real issue when you're meant to be this up and coming young Ferrari academy driver, and you're consistently being beaten by a 41-year-old. It's like Nico Rosberg said, like when he drove for Mercedes, it was defining of his career that he kept beating Michael. For Giovinazzi, he should have that same mindset. He should be beating Raikkonen race after race.
Yeah, but we'll see what happens with him. But he doesn't really seem to be improving a great deal. And I guess the car is pretty terrible, so it's hard to show what you can do in a car that's kind of a dog. But yeah, he should be at least be aiming to beat Raikkonen, and he did that in the first race, didn't he? Obviously, because Raikkonen's tyre fell off. But when did he beat him last week? I can't remember.
I don't believe so. I think Kimi was ordered by, actually.
Oh yeah, Kimi had a really good race last week. Actually, he did moves, didn't he? Yeah, he should be beating Kimi, and he's not. So it's not good for him or the team, really.
Yeah, but they weren't the last team on the grid. Ruby, it went to Williams once again. We thought after a great qualifying, 12th and 15th, they finished 18th, a lap down with Russell, and 19th, 5 laps down with Latifi. It could have been a lot better for Williams and looked a lot better but it just didn't play out that way today.
Exactly. If Russell had a bad race, Latifi didn't even have a race. I'm pretty sure almost every time the cameras turned to Latifi, he was facing the wrong direction or was being involved in some pit lane collision that I can't remember as to whether it was being investigated after the race or not, but
I think he got a penalty during the race.
10-second penalty, I believe, was it? Oh, no, no, it can't be 10. 5.
5-second penalty.
Oh, I'm sure that made all the difference to his, his final standing, which seems to be a very, trending punishment for drivers, But yeah, like Williams again, just every time we think George Russell is going to, maybe get his first points in Formula One, he just slips down the standings. And there was a point during this race where Latifi was actually ahead of Russell. I had to double check that I was watching the correct stream. Yeah, just another disappointing day for Williams and George Russell again. As Sam said, like Giovinazzi should be beating Raikkonen. Russell, is beating Latifi apart from the one race where Latifi gets points. But George will just, hope that he can continue out driving the car to the standard that he's doing.
Yeah, of course he was unfortunately given that 5-second penalty. Was a bit of a dumb move by Williams. Seems to be getting in the habit of that. But one thing I want to finally touch on about this race, Alex Albon, of course, is being currently investigated by the FA for a breach of the sporting code for his team drying his grid start. I just want to get sort of all your opinions on that and what you think will come of it. So we'll start with you, Owain. What's your view on this?
To be honest, part of me, I obviously see why it's a serious thing. And during the race when I was watching, I didn't see why it would be that big an issue. But obviously when the commentators sort of made a big thing of it, we're like, this could be disqualification. I realised how serious it was. I don't know how I feel about it. I mean, I think the big thing about it is that if they let Red Bull do it for one car, then, we'll go 2 races and then we'll see the teams rock up with huge, trolleys and hoardings, just on any wet race, almost jet turbines just to dry the grid. And I don't like where that goes. I don't think that's in the sort of nature of the sport. So I guess they've got to nip it in the bud. Yeah, I guess it's tempting. It's obviously tempting to obviously use your leaf blower to just get a bit more airflow over the section of the tarmac where you're going to be pulling away from. And it's especially tempting when there might be a bit more sort of chaos. I don't doubt that this has been done in the past when there are more people on the grid, more celebrities, you couldn't see it. The fact that they've been scrutinised, I don't know, it just sort of seems to me that they've picked the wrong time to do it and they're going to get hammered for it, I guess.
Yeah, I've kind of thought the same when I first saw about it. I was like, why is that an issue? Like, they're just drying the floor. I kind of just like, well, whatever. Then they were talking about how Ted Kravitz said, "Oh, this could be quite a serious." And if it's against, I don't know which section code is against, but if it's against some code in the regulations, then yeah, it's a slam dunk penalty, and they shouldn't have done it. I'm not too sure. To be honest, I really think they should kind of punish maybe the team rather than the driver, because obviously Alex hasn't. I don't know if he's asked them to do that. I don't really know if he's asked them, "Oh, can you drive my grid slot for me?" So I don't know if they can maybe just fine the team instead of disqualifying Alex, because it would be a real shame if he lost the result from the race today, because he, as you said, he did if it's against the rules, then yeah, it's there's no doubt then they should be punished for it, definitely. Then you have people comparing that to like, why isn't Bottas getting a penalty for jumping his grid slot? So it's kind of it's a difficult one, really. But yeah, if it's against the rules, then it's a penalty. I agree with that.
Yeah, as you said, the disqualification could be on the cards for Alex Albon. Ruby, do you think a disqualification would be too harsh, or does it send out the right message of, yeah, you don't dry your grid slot?
Well, since this practice became illegal in the sports in Malaysia 2017, obviously the FIA want to continue enforcing that, and disqualification is a very severe penalty, but it is a penalty nonetheless that the stewards have at their disposal. And the argument could be made that Albon might not have achieved the result that he had without the grid drying technique that Red Bull used. So obviously they're yet to give a penalty. I mean, as I said earlier, the FIA are in the habit of giving penalties that just put them a couple of milliseconds ahead of the car behind. Maybe they will have to do a severe penalty in order to, as Owain mentioned, keep it out of the habit of the drivers in the future, out of the teams in the future.
Yeah, it's definitely bad practice. I mean, teams do it in the pit lane. They dry their grid boxes, their pit boxes for when it's wet, just to get sort of optimum traction. But yeah, it seems. I do think personally it is a bit fishy if you're the only team on the grid that's drying your grid box to try and get that advantage. I do think disqualification from the race would be a bit harsh, because he got an all right start, did Alex Albon. I think there were drivers out there that got better starts despite not drying their grid box, so it's not like he really took full advantage of it. I think a big fine for the team. I don't know. I think a big fine would put
grid drop penalty made for next race, perhaps 5 place grid drop, something on 10 place. I don't know.
What if they do 250 millilitres of water spread across his grid box at the next race, whatever it's dry? I was going to say, on a serious note, sorry. Yeah. I was going to say, on a serious note, why would they not try it with Verstappen's box? I mean, it stands to reason if you're the same team, why would you not just do it on one and then the other?
They were a bit busy regarding.
Yeah, they were a bit busy with repairing his car.
Oh, so actually, that was a good. Well, no, you've got even more of a reason. Then you can just be like, "Oh no, it fell out. Well, I had to get some brake out, and I just left the leaf blower on against the track."
Yeah. Right. Finally, the last thing I want to ask all you drivers of the day. Personally, for me, I'm going to give it to Alex Albon. I think it was a great recovery drive from where he started. Good, actually, reverse order. Sam, who are you choosing for driver of the day?
It's a difficult one today because there's quite a few candidates, really. Magnussen is a really big shout, I think, because he did a really good job of getting that Haas into the points. Really good strategy call. Then I think I've just got to go with Lewis, really, because I was just the absolute masterclass of controlling a race, weather, strategy calls. Yesterday as well, pole position, that lap that he did was just great. Valtteri did a really good lap yesterday, and still Lewis managed to beat him. So I think for the whole kind of weekend, everything's summed up. I think I've got to go with Lewis, really.
I'd go with Albon, just because he's had a sort of bad weekend trying to get the car to do anything. He's obviously been sort of failed by it. Started in 13th and, potential penalty aside, he's made it to 5th, which is, admittedly, he's made it into probably 3rd fastest, at least in qualifying pace. And then on race pace, probably 2nd fastest. So, but it's still quite an impressive achievement to go up 8 places in a race that's, there's not slow people in front. There's fairly decent cars in there. And
purely just based on the incredible achievement of managing to finish 5 laps down, I'll give it to Latifi. Not really. Yeah, I'm fully on Sam's page here. I think Lewis, purely just based on the fact that, it's an absolute masterclass of a performance, was dominant the entire weekend, fully deserved, today's victory.
Yeah, I mean, I was torn, but I think both drivers would be definitely contenders. Funny, no one said Max, but
Verstappen's an honourable mention actually because he did a very good job. He made the race a tad interesting, really. Without him there, it would have been pretty boring, I think. To be honest.
Yeah. Engineer of the day goes to Max Verstappen's engineer.
And one more thing, can we get rid of those stupid fan cams on this side of the track, because that's just so cringy. I know it's good memes, just stupid, isn't it?
What do you mean you don't want Nico Rosberg?
I've just seen one on Twitter. It's got Nickelback photograph on that in some place with Nico Rosberg with the "Is His Career Over" meme. So I guess it's good for the memes, but it's a difficult one.
I think I'd rather see the AWS stats go first.
Oh yeah, please.
The tire performance one especially.
I brought it back.
Yeah, that was poor. Anyway, that's all we have for time to talk today.
Can I bring up the stewards? The stewards calls that they've recently done.
Oh, have they just
hate me for this? I'm really sorry.
Oh, what have they done now?
Okay, so right, we've been talking about it in the live chat, but the stewards calls, right? So for breach of Article 27.1 of the FIA Formula One sporting regs, both Haas cars have been summoned to the stewards. 6:30 local time, so about 18 minutes ago, if you're watching the live one, for driver aids during the formation lap. So that suggests it's a car thing. So I don't know what that would entail, but if they found guilty, I think that would probably carry a fairly hefty...
It'll be like Alfa Romeo last year at Hockenheim. They got 30-second penalties each for those, I think it was for driver aids on the formation lap, or like something like that. That could be an interesting one. I've actually just seen on Twitter that Renault are expected to protest.
I've seen that.
They have protested it.
Oh, God.
They just can't take it, can they, that someone else has done a better job than them? It's just...
I did see the suggestion that until there is a formal actual statement finding regarding the Racing Point car for 2020, Renault and the teams in the similar position will just continue to protest the Racing Point car.
Well, I guess
for each race.
Well, I guess they still have the same grounds for protest. I mean, they are still using the same brake ducts as they did for the Hungarian Grand Prix. Therefore, if it was deemed admissible by the FIA in that race, it's going to keep being deemed admissible until something's said about it. But you feel like they're just taking the piss slightly with it now.
I want to get them disqualified from like every individual race instead of just one race. So they'll just keep doing it, won't they, until the FIA come to a decision. So,
I mean, when they're 0.4 of a second faster than the next nearest car in qualifying, that does sort of look really bad.
Yeah. I mean, if it's deemed legal and the FIA say this is fine, Renault are going to look so stupid. This could be something that could seriously backfire, because at least when Racing Point protested Renault's braking system, that went through and it was, deemed to be actually illegal. So it does feel like a bit of sort of petty sort of get back from Renault this season.
I think they're just bitter, aren't they, really?
That does seem to exist sort of in the Renault team. You've seen it with the Ricciardo debacle and also with Red Bull. I feel like there's some sort of pettiness in their PR department. I don't understand it. Or in that team. It's very, very odd.
They spent a lot of money to go nowhere, really. They've not progressed, have they, in the last 4 years? They'd get Racing Point, McLaren are both better than them, so I think they're just a bit annoyed. But it's no secret we don't like Renault on this.
Mind Renault.
Yeah.
Be a little bit more white, less whiny, and it might be okay.
Yeah.
Anyway,
a lot to talk about in that. If we might have to come out and do another one if all this stuff gets.
We'll end this podcast here before any more stewards' inquiries come out. Just a reminder to anyone listening, either on stream or later on, we do have an official store merchandise, so you can grab yourself some mugs, some t-shirts with some phrases, especially from the Netflix series. If you just go onto the F1 Chronicles website, you'll be able to find them. Of course, if you are listening on Facebook, you'll know that we are live streaming these shows on Facebook now. But if you are listening later, you can tune in live and listen to these before they go out. Just make sure to follow the F1 Chronicles Facebook page. We're also available on YouTube, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Music, Omni Studio, Pocket Cast. Just search for the F1 Grid Talk podcast. Huge back catalogue of shows from previous races, as well as documentary and interview with Mario Sola from Pirelli. We also have a Reddit. Just look for a new F1 podcast looking for feedback. And we also have our own subreddit, which is F1 Grid Talk. You can support our Patreon, fund mics, better lights, better recording studios, studios. But we will be back on Sunday to preview the British Grand Prix. So thank you very much for watching. Goodbye.
Hey, everybody.